Welcome back, everybody. We are glad to have Audrey Dauvet on the podcast today. She is the host of the Brand and New podcast. It has to do with branding yourself internationally. And Audrey, can you give people a little background on who you are, what you do, maybe some of your history?
Sure. So thanks for inviting me, Jeff. I'm a French-born lawyer, and I'm also an entrepreneur based in the US and in France. So I'm traveling a lot. And I developed an expertise in intellectual property many years ago. And I should say that today it helps me as an entrepreneur, I would say on a day-to-day basis.
So on a day-to-day basis, it's a challenge, you're saying, for entrepreneurs, this branding and protecting your brand?
Absolutely. It's, I would say, even crucial because, IP in general and branding in particular has a great impact on entrepreneurs because it's absolutely essential for us to safeguard our investment and, to be able to make our business properly and transform our innovation potential and our creativity into market value and competitiveness. So I have used from day one the intellectual property rights, so what I know well, and the ones I considered relevant to protect my brand, to protect my creations. And that's also what I noticed from entrepreneurs I've worked with. It's something absolutely essential.
Well, can you give me an example of an entrepreneur that maybe didn't have protection or the right type of protection on their brand?
Absolutely.
Versus maybe one who did.
Okay, so I would say let's start with the last example. So when you own your intellectual property, when you register your trademark, when you protect your creation, it helps create an essential differentiator for your venture. So for example, I know some entrepreneurs who from the first day decided to apply for a trademark and develop their trademark. And after that, when they met success, were able to, trade to really get money from this trademark because it's what we call the intangible asset. It's a big part of the value today of a lot of companies. So on the other side, if you don't protect these assets, you open the door to potential competitors who will do that. And I met also a lot of people who did not take the time or did not spend the money from the beginning to protect these assets. And these assets are also part of their work. So it can be very unfair. You work a lot on something, and at the end of the day, someone else may benefit from it because you did not protect your rights properly.
Well, what are the differences between like having a patent or a trademark in the United States versus having an international one?
Okay, you would be protected territorially. So it means that if you protect your mark or your patent in the US, you won't be able to make claims, strong claims, let's say in China or in, in any country in Europe or Africa. So it depends on your strategy. I met a lot of entrepreneurs and representatives of companies who decided to go step by step and who decide, to protect first in one country and after in a region, let's say the US first, and after that, the US and Canada, and after that, US, Canada, and Europe, and the European Union, and so on. So it can be a path that is very linked to the strategy of the company, but it's something that, help to size the kind of protection that is relevant for your industry, your company, your ambitions, your investments, and yeah, the plan you have on a long-term basis.
Well, I'm curious. You brought up China, so I mean, it almost seems like to a certain extent there's nothing you can do in China to protect your brand or even any type of intellectual property. I mean, how do you set that up? What's the cost to and the process to protect your brand in China and then to enforce it?
Mm-hmm. It's not so difficult to protect your brand in China. It really depends on the context, the fact that you have or not intellectual property rights there. So, in other said differently, you made an application, you have a registration, so you protect property, you have the title for your mark. So then, if you are, let's say, copied, if your product is, counterfeited, for instance, you will be able to go to the courts in China to defend your rights. So I would say that the protection part is not a big challenge, and the IP laws in China are very complete and consistent. So the thing that is most of the time discussed is about enforcement, in the sense that the decisions that the judges can render may not be deterrent enough for counterfeiters to stop their bad behavior. And I think from everything I've seen in my own experience as an IP lawyer, that things change and that it goes in the good direction.
But so it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's you don't have a choice if you're going to go global with your brand, that you need to set up the protection in every country and especially China.
Correct. Correct. But China may not be, China may not be the big topic if, depending on the industry, there may be, problems of counterfeiting in other regions. It's we talk a lot about China, but it's not only about it. You have other problems in other markets about infringement for other kind of goods.
What are the countries that have the worst violations?
Oh my. It's very difficult to say because you have the country where the infringements, the infringing products are produced, the ones where they are sold, and most of the time they are not necessarily the same markets. So I would say it's very difficult to answer, and it's something that is very moving because again, depending on the kind of product, you won't have the same issues in the same areas. So you have problems in Asian countries, you have problems in African countries, you have problems in Americas, you have problems in Europe. So I would say that these issues are unfortunately a problem that you can face in many countries in the world.
Sorry, so I'm curious that I hear that we need to protect across multiple countries, and it just sounds like, how many countries typically would somebody protect their brand across, and what does that cost, and what is that process? It sounds burdensome.
You have that's the beauty of applying for a trademark now in this moment. You have the opportunity to have protection in not only in a country but also in a certain region. So, for instance, one trademark would cover all the countries of the European Union, but you would also have the opportunity to have what is called an international trademark. So you would choose different countries that you consider relevant. For instance, if you plan to develop your brand in certain European countries and some American countries or in Asia, you would have the possibility to choose the countries that are relevant for you. And the cost is not crazy at all. But again, if you are a big corporation, I don't know, if you are Apple, or if you are a startup that has not, raised any funds yet, you won't have to. You won't be able to answer the question the same way.
Right, but so can you give me a for instance? I mean, if I'm going to protect my brand in major markets across the world, what's the ballpark cost that's going to be?
Okay, you will have to spend a few thousands of dollars. If I talk about an amount, so I don't have a precise amount because it really depends on exactly where, and also the number of products or services that you want to protect. So for instance, if you were just interested by, let's say, beverages or I don't know, clothes, but if you are interested, it's what we call, you will have to protect your brand in one or two classes. There is a classification that has to be implemented. But if you want to protect your brand in a lot of different areas because you feel that you will develop a product or a service that will have a whole, let's say, development in different sectors. Think about a fashion brand that decides first to develop in clothes, in fashion, but after that plans to also sell watches and sell accessories and sell shoes and sell bags, etc., etc. You will have a different cost because you don't cover the same, your umbrella is not the same.
Okay, but so can you tell me a success story, a specific success story where someone went to the trouble of getting either their brand or their products protected, and then in a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable amount of cost was able to get protection when somebody was copying it?
That's difficult. One, I don't have an example like this one in mind right now. But I would say that you don't only have certain laws to protect your brand. You will have other ways to protect your company. For instance, there is this concept of unfair competition. So if it's not because you have the good rights, the good brand in your portfolio to defend your rights, you may have other ways to protect your company.
And what is unfair competition?
Unfair competition is when a competitor has, I would say, when a competitor has a behavior that is not considered as fair according to, court decisions, according to the market, to the practice.
Okay, so if I've got something on my brand, let's say with it we filed and we protected Managed to Win, and then we saw somebody in a foreign country using our brand. What's the typical process I'm going to go through to protect it? You can choose any country you want. I mean, choose China. We'll pick on China. What's the process I'm going to have to go through to protect it, to stop them from doing that? Okay.
So you will have, let's say that you have your brand protected in China, okay? So you notice, you are informed that your brand has been copied in China. Then what you will do usually is that you will make an investigation to gather as many as the evidence as possible to show that the problem is real, is actual. You will also work on assessing the damage for you. What does it mean in terms of loss of turnover, for instance? And you will build your case as you would do in any other country. So you will work with a lawyer, a local lawyer who knows the laws well, who will tell you also your chances of success, because the company that copies you in China may not copy you perfectly. They may have used your trademark in a similar way, but not in an identical way. You know what I mean? It's you will have to assess your chances of success. You will have also to define if there is, as I said earlier, unfair competition. So meaning that there are like deceptive business practices that cause a harm to your business or to your consumers. And after that, if you see that your case is good, you will be able to go to the court. Or if you want to have a preliminary step, you can also send a cease and desist letter to denounce and to ask this company to stop using your trademark in a way that is not legal.
So as unpleasant as that is, and as expensive as that sounds, it's kind of like I have no choice. If I'm going to have a brand and I'm really going to build my company and maximize it, I need to protect it. So at least I have that option to pursue to try to shut down somebody who's, misusing my brand. Right?
Yeah. Unless you use also you work with the lawyers that would be able to scare the company, because it's not sometimes in many cases actually based on my experience, based on a cease and desist letter, the company can stop immediately or on a short-term basis copying or selling goods that infringe your rights. So it's always good to build a strategy. In other words, it's not necessarily black or white. There may be different steps before going to the court.
So, okay, let me shift gears a little bit. Will you please explain what you're doing with your Brand and New podcast, and also, maybe give us some more information on the International Trademark Association that you're part of?
Sure. So the International Trademark Association, called the INTA, is a global association of brand owners and professionals who are dedicated to supporting trademarks and intellectual property to foster consumer trust, economic growth, and innovation. And this association gathers more than 7,000 organizations in almost 190 countries, and INTA members, they collectively contribute almost US $12 trillion to global GDP annually. So it's huge. And for comparison, in 2016, the GDP of China was $11.2 trillion, and the GDP of the US was $18.6 trillion. So you see that the association covers a lot of companies, and they represent a lot of brand owners. So to give you a figure, we are talking about 31,000 trademark professionals, and include brand owners from major corporations, but also small and medium-sized companies, law firms, and non-profits. And there are also government agency members, professors, students who are members of the association. And
okay.
I can. Do you want me to say more about Brand and New?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So Brand and New explores with a 360 degrees vision the interaction between intellectual property and change in our societies, in our economies and cultures. And so every 2 weeks on Tuesday, our guests share their best practices and ideas on hot topics that are impacting IP and its ecosystem. So I can give you a few examples. We've been talking so far about artificial intelligence, about cybersecurity and blockchain, but also topics that are not necessarily tech-oriented. We've been talking about, for instance, the legalization of cannabis brands in Canada. We have been talking about corporate social responsibility. So, the approach is pretty extensive on what we can cover, talking about intellectual property and brands in particular.
So if somebody wanted to get their brand protected, it seems like that's a good place for us to kind of close out. Is what steps should where should they go? What should they do? Should they learn more from your organization and or your podcast, or should they immediately dive in and find a lawyer somewhere? What should they do?
The good news is that the INTA gathers so many IP professionals that, from most of the countries in the world, that, if you're looking for an IP lawyer, I should say that most of the time, this person or this firm is already a member of the INTA. The podcast itself helps to know more about a specific topic, mainly the hot topics of our times. But it's I would say, a part of what INTA can bring on the table. And if you go to the website inta.org, you will find a lot of information, very practical information as well, to know more about brands, protection, defense, what is happening, what is changing in different countries. So yeah, it's a very, very good tool to explore.
Okay, so inta.org. And then if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? If they have questions or if they want to check out your podcast, how do they do that?
Okay, sure. They can correspond with me through the website of the INTA, but also through the podcast Brand and New. I'm always very happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. I think it has really been helpful for us for you to give the input and advice on the patents and what people should be doing. Well, not patents, excuse me, the IP protection for your branding and more, and your organization. So it really sounds like something our listeners should be checking out. And I hope they do. I hope they listen to your podcast and contact you with any questions. So thank you very much for being with us.